got a potential top 2 pick in the 2025 NHL Draft to break down a full scouting report on James Hagens for today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi, QMJHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian High, USHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, the Prospect Spotlight is on James Hagens. We'll break down his game in detail. So in the first segment, we'll focus on the tools, the puck skills, and mainly focus also on the profile overall, how many points he's got this year, all that good stuff. Then in the second segment, we'll dig deep. We'll look at the tools, the toolkit, the habits, the overall kind of processing of the game, how he kind of approaches the game, and how his tools blend together is going to be the main focus in that second segment. And then finally, in the third, we'll look at the overall projection with James Hagens, how he projects on draft day, how he projects at the NHL level, what kind of comps we're talking about for him, and all that stuff. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. I do want to talk about one thing before we get into the episode, though. This will be my final week at Locked On NHL Prospects. It's been an absolute ride, and I've really appreciated every moment of being part of this, the Locked On family. It's been wonderful. I've made so many friends, made so much progress, and this will all be culminating on January 31st, which will be my last episode for the show. So make sure to tune in. We'll give you a good show, kind of reminisce on the good times, and kind of make an overall kind of just description of kind of how the last 2 years have been for me and how the last year has been for me and Sebastian here on the podcast. With that out of the way, let's talk about James Hagens, a wonderful, wonderful prospect. He was projected at the top of the 2025 NHL Draft, I think for the past year, I would say. It's been a while since this kid has been kind of the top name discussed here for the 2025 NHL Draft. Talk me through the projection and why he has been so effective at the NCAA level so far for Boston College.
Yeah, so James Hagens is a 5'11", 176-pound left shot centerman who's been playing fantastic hockey throughout basically the NTDP and college ranks in the past 2 to 3 seasons. He was amazing last year with the UA team program in his D-1 campaign, really leading the charge offensively in that group, totally outshining players like Cole Yzerman on that team, and just being more consistently dangerous offensively. But this season he's been combining for some lovely offensive hockey and really creative offensive sequences on a top line in Boston College with Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault, probably the most entertaining line that we've seen in college hockey in recent years, in tandem with that Will Smith line with the same wingers, of course, last season. But with James Hagens, there's a couple of aspects in his game that make him very exciting. Here in the first segment, we're going to look a bit more at the physical components of that and the tools and the puck skills that make him so dangerous offensively. But a lot of this also has to do with the habits, which we're going to explore more in the second segment. But Hadi, kick us off here with the tools. Is there a specific one of the playmaking, handling, and goal scoring that you want to focus on first and foremost here?
Yeah, I think that Hagens at his core is a playmaking creator, right? He's really, really good at finding lanes and transition and using his speed to get up the ice and then modulating that pace to find these little pockets of space, actually to create these pockets of space with that pace modulation and kind of exploit speed differentials, whether he's going slower than the defender in front of him or whether he's going faster than him. He's always creating these differentials that he can then exploit to create passing lanes. He's so good at finding seams. He can pass cross ice really comfortably. I think for me, the playmaking remains kind of the standout tool in this game, but the handling is really, really close. I love the fact that he's able to kind of exploit a wide range of motion. He can go from left to right really comfortably. He keeps the puck on the heel of his blade, which keeps it really controlled. Right, he's able to make quick movements with his stick back and forth to kind of set his shot up or set his pass up in order to kind of create from that position. So I think the passing and the handling are kind of the clear standout tools for me. But the shot isn't half bad either, right? Like this is something like he's able to shoot and score at an NCAA level already at such a young age.
Yeah, he can. I mean, he started off the season with a rather unfortunate goal scoring drought, but it's picked up a little bit more here in the back half. But this is a player that scores with his habits and his reads and his creativity in the routes he selects and his ability to ride defenders' blind spots, find gaps in coverage, make defenders make uncomfortable choices down low. And that's mainly how he gets his goals. He's very opportunistic in the dangerous areas of the ice. But the shot itself, I wouldn't say it's anything special. Like he's not going to be a player that's going to score from range all that much. He's not going to be a power play like one-timer option. But his shot is enough of a threat and it's accurate. He times the shot well with like flybys. He goes for tips really well. He's really accurate in his release. That makes him a dangerous kind of creator through his shot rather than just a pure scorer going for the back of the net every single time when he goes for a shot. He's a lot more strategic with his shooting habits, and he's not a player that just wastes possession with low danger shot attempts either. He's quite selective with them and gets to dangerous areas. But to talk about his handling a little bit, I have loved how his pace, handling, and mobility have combined so far in the NCAA. The same thing last season, and I mean, at the U18 World Championships. I know it's like almost a year ago now from last May, but that performance was something that I think is something that we're going to remember for a long time. He broke the scoring record at that tournament with 22 points in 7 games in a hopeless attempt to win Team USA a gold medal there. It just was not to be against a very strong Team Canada. What would you say about Hagens' progression in his tools, going back to his D-1 season through that excellent tail end and the tournaments, and now into this campaign as well?
I think the progression has been really interesting, but I think primarily what's been standing out consistently is just how phenomenal of a skater this kid is. Like he's so good. There's such a separating gear between him and everyone else that's the same age. That was very, very clear at the U18 Worlds. That was also clear at the World Juniors. Like he was using his speed really well in transition to create. And it's all the little details as well. Like he uses crossovers a ton to kind of keep himself deceptive. He's really good at, again, accelerating, decelerating. He's got really crisp cutbacks as well. Like he's able to cut across the grain and kind of create passes off of that. It does a lot of things in motion. So the skating really stands out. And for me, that's the best tool in his toolkit. Like he's an 8th grade skater out of 9 on our tool grade here at Elite Prospects on our last board. So very interesting side of that as well. But I think above all, it's just his ability to think the game ahead of everyone in his age group. I think the World Juniors performances he had were good, but not great. But he was unstoppable at the U18 Worlds. So it's certainly a matter of kind of scaling up that skill set. And I don't even know if James Hagens is going to be at the World Juniors next year. Like I think there's a chance that an NHL team could see him as a potential starter in their lineup starting next year. And if he doesn't get released to the World Juniors, I think that would be unfortunate because that would be a great opportunity for him to show off what he can do with an extra year of development physically and just skills-wise as well. In terms of the last thing I'd mention in terms of Hagens' actual tools, I'd say the physicality is just about average, if not slightly above average. I think he's decent at using his frame in order to kind of spin off checks, find soft ice, but he's not a proactive physical player. Like he can absorb contact, but he doesn't seek it out. It's just when it comes to him, he's able to handle it, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good description of it, and I still think that I mean he's 5'11" and 176 pounds. He's probably still going to fill out to like 190, 200-pound range once he's a full-time NHLer. And I think when you combine that frame with his skating ability and just the momentum he'll be able to gather at the NHL level as well, when he really like fills out his lower body, I think it'll be a really difficult obstacle to push off the puck. He'll be constantly attacking with that momentum as well. And if that kind of player starts initiating contact and bumping into opponents to create pockets of space, that's a very dangerous player at a high pace.
Yeah, for sure. I think James Hagens' skill with Michael Misa's physical habits would be just an absolutely phenomenal player.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our first segment done. We'll get into our second segment here where we delve into the details of James Hagens' game. So the habits, the tools, the toolkit, and how they kind of all interact together. We'll get into that in a moment. Let's just hear from our sponsors first and take a quick break.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling out the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds in front of you and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to fanduel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's at fanduel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
Alrighty, so let's move on to our second segment here and delve into the details of James Hagens' game. And let's start with the habits. I mean, there is a ton to talk about here. I think we can start with the skating habits. We already kind of alluded to it in the first segment, but there's a lot to work with here. So yeah, James Hagens at the core of his identity is just he's a crossover usage monster who has phenomenal transition upside, and that's the way he impacts the game, right? Like he's all about transitions.
It's all about transition and about layering his other puck skills in at those top speeds, in with that mobility, through crossovers, in motion. The playmaking ability at those highest paces with hook passes, getting around defenders, being adaptable, slowing your pace just a second before releasing a pass in order to just get the angle right. James Hagens makes all of these small adjustments at his highest speeds and very fluidly with high-end mobility and this high-end creativity and accurate playmaking skill. And I think that's really what makes him such a potent playmaker and why he projects as a potentially like game-breaking playmaker at the NHL level. And we'll talk about it a bit more in the next segment, but one of our player comps for this guy is Jack Hughes. If everything goes right, Logan Cooley is in there as well stylistically. These are players that can break open the game with their pace and with the fluidity of combining all of those elements in their toolkit. And in order to do that at a high level, you have to be able to think the game at just the highest pace, which Hagens does.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's also the hockey sense blends into that so seamlessly. Like this is a kid who's so incredibly good at making decisions at high speeds. There's one particular assist that he had at the World Juniors where he got to a loose puck first in the offensive zone on a dump out. And just kind of button hooked out of the corner with the puck, and it was really intelligent. He took a quick look, but was able to identify exactly where to put the puck, how much weight to put on it, in order to hit his teammate who was getting into the zone in stride for a shot. It was a key part of the play, and I think that's a key part of why he's so impactful with Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault. Were really also good at finding space in transition, at being really good off-puck movers in the offensive zone. And they need someone who's able to get them the puck consistently in the right spots with the right weight on it. And James Hagens is so phenomenally good at that. I think that's a key part of what makes him so effective. So I think his habits and his details really blend well with the teammates he has right now in Boston College. But I also think that those are transferable to any good off-puck mover in the NHL. Right, like I could name you 80 players that could fit well next to James Hagens in terms of wingers, right?
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons for that is that James Hagens, one of the reasons he's such a potent rush attacker specifically, he is so aggressive in attacking pockets of space. When something opens up in front of him, his first instinct isn't to look at making a pass to that space. It's attacking it head on, driving into it, and forcing defenses to make those uncomfortable decisions to either pressure him and leave space behind themselves or back off and allow him to march further into the offensive zone. And
Yeah.
I think attacking defenses head on like that with that pace and with all the tools that we've been talking about so far in this episode, that's a way to put your wingers in positions where if they're reading that play well, they can execute and fall into those gaps and spaces. And I mean, Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault are two of the better wingers in college hockey to do exactly that. And with different abilities, in those spaces. I mean, Ryan Leonard just crashed into that, and Gabe Perreault is such a high-end, like, one-touch playmaker in those tight areas. But I think James Hagens is a perfect complement to those kinds of players, but is also an easy player to elevate the guys around him, and a various kind of like array of toolkits as well can fit into that quite seamlessly.
Yeah, it's also all about feel with Hagens, right? Like, he just
Yeah.
feels the game so incredibly well. And I think that comes with a scanning habit, sure, but there's also an innate aspect to it, which is just his ability to just take in information so quickly, while in motion, while chaos is happening around him. There's a sense of calm. You know that when he gets the puck, he's going to do something smart with it. Just a great, great feel for the game as well. I also want to talk about how the handling and passing combine with that transition ability, with that skating ability, that ability to push the puck up the ice. It's not just he's not just a guy that attacks pockets of space in transition and just sprints at guys. There's some really intelligent details, like the way he approaches a defender who's pinching versus a defender who's kind of backing off is really smart. He's really good at, let's say a defenseman's in front of him and he's skating up the ice, and the defenseman's trying to match footwork heading backwards with him, and they're both kind of at the same speed. They'll kind of inch wide very, very slightly until the defenseman kind of commits his feet. The moment the defenseman commits his feet, he's inside. He's able to switch directions really quickly with that great edge work, and that helps him utilize his intelligence, his ability to read opponents' feet and make the right decision. Like, there's such a polished element to that side of him, right?
It really is, and I think one comparison to an NHL player that has come to mind a couple times when I've watched James Hagens operate in the offensive zone, exactly in situations like the one that you just explained, in terms of manipulating individual defenders in those 1v1 situations, and that ability to deceive and immediately read and react as soon as that body weight is committed. Lane Hutson a little bit. I mean, you have better skating with James Hagens than with Lane Hutson in all four directions in terms of the polish of it, but the deceptive qualities and the pace of reading that body weight commitment before just going the opposite way. So being very consistent in being able to beat players 1v1 as a result of that. I see some links there.
Yeah, so do I. Especially in their approach to deception and manipulation. Everything they do is just soaked in it, and it's really, really useful when you're trying to create as an undersized player. You need to be able to fool guys. You're not going to be able to power through them. I think Hagens has the ability to power through guys, but not to the level where he's going to be able to shrug off a 6'3" defender who's trucking through him. Right? Like,
we're not talking about Mikko Rantanen here.
Exactly. There are some limitations to his game in terms of his physical abilities and his ability to kind of blend power moves into his skating. I think a lot of what he does in terms of his ability to get around defenses rather than kind of cutting through them and smarting his way out of situations, a lot of what he does to power through or around defenses has to do with momentum, has to do with maintaining foot speed in transition, dropping the shoulder, and just using that edge work in order to get around players. I don't think he's a guy who's going to be able to power through NHL defenders unless miraculously he adds a couple pounds and a couple inches and a bunch of pounds. I don't think that's happening. But regardless, that's not why you're drafting James Hagens. You're drafting James Hagens to be an elite creator. You see it from the half wall. You see it in transition. You see it off the cycle. He impacts the game offensively in so many different ways, but he's not a defensive slouch either, right? Like, he's pretty consistent with his involvement, his implication, his effort level, his motor are pretty good. He's not going to be an elite defensive player, but he's not going to be by any means a liability. I think he's got the capability to be a good NHL defensive player as well, right?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think he will be good enough defensively to be able to match up against opposition top lines. I don't think he's going to be shutting them down and gaining Selke consideration in that kind of role. But if he gets to his upside, he definitely can more than stay afloat in those situations. Like, he's already learned the center role quite well. He's been playing down the middle. Even with the NTDP in his D-2, D-1 campaigns, he was religiously playing top six center and rarely ever like playing on the wing. And through that experience and that consistency in that role, he's really gotten very comfortable in it. So there's certainly occasions where he misses a read. That happens, especially playing NCAA hockey as an 18-year-old freshman. But overall, he has decent habits. good scanner, drops low defensively to support his defenders, and picks up secondary threats pretty consistently in the mid to high slot. So not too much to complain about there with James Hagens. But he's also supported very well right now at Boston College, playing on a line with Ryan Leonard, who's one of the best defensive wingers outside the NHL today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that support has actually supported his game, his defensive game. He's learning from Leonard, which you love to see for an 18-year-old at this stage. That's our second segment done about the details of Hagens' game. Now we'll get into the third segment and talk about the projection, stylistic comps, team fit, all that good stuff. Especially the teams that have the best fit for this guy. We racked our brains on this, and I think you'll be surprised with some of the names in here. But let's take a quick break and head into that right away. Alrighty, so final segment is up. We'll be talking about the overall projection with James Hagens, both where he goes on draft day and what type of player we're talking about at the NHL level. We'll also talk about the comps that we have for James Hagens, what type of players we're talking about as comparables for James Hagens, and finally, which teams will be the best fit. So let's start with the projection on draft day. I think at this point, pretty much every scout agrees Matthew Schaefer has exceeded what we've seen from James Hagens so far this season. But I don't think that's as much of a knock on James Hagens as it is just a testament to how fantastic Matt Schaefer has been this year, right?
Absolutely it is. And also with Matt Schaefer, you have all of just the glowing off-ice reviews, all the adversity he's faced and still succeeded throughout, as well as being one of the youngest players in the draft class, just 5 days off the cutoff for being 2026 eligible. Yeah. That combines into a profile that you just really love to see when you're working in the NHL. I mean, 6'2" elite level skater and that profile being as good defensively as offensively. That's a player that you want to pick for your lineup. And I think that we're going to see a defenseman go first overall for the first time in a little while as a result of that. But James Hagens is still a high likelihood top 6 center with high-end playmaking ability. Could definitely end up on a first line if he hits his upside. And if he doesn't, then you have a highly dynamic and creative outlet on your second line who can still play decent defensive minutes throughout. So you're getting a very valuable asset either way. And whether he goes somehow at first overall, still possible, or at second or third, wherever that ends up being, I think whichever team picks them will be very happy with the player they have, with that combination of creativity and tools and intelligence just mingling together in a really cohesive way at such a young age already.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that I think about it, and Logan, like we had the same conversations about Logan Cooley in 2022, right?
Yeah.
You know, he has a skill. He's able to
less maturity, probably with Cooley.
Even less maturity, but the conversation was pretty similar in terms of how we talked about his projection.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
absolutely.
Very skilled. He's really capable in transition. He can shoot, he can pass, he can dangle.
Great skater.
But he projects more as a second line center, as a guy who, will be a very, very good piece on his second line. Could potentially, possibly be on the top line. I'm worried we're falling in the same trap with James Hagens. I see the top line upside. I see the path to being a full-time, 80-plus point NHL center who's going to be able to handle those matchups, those difficult matchups against some of the best defensive centers in the league, the Barkovs, the Points and those guys. I see that in his game. Things need to go right, sure, but we've seen it with NTDP centers. They're able to kind of live up to the expectations of NHL hockey. They're really well coached. They're really well developed. Listen, I see a very likely possibility that James Hagens is a first-line center at the end of the day. Now, the projection in the NHL is kind of that. I don't see the upside going into like franchise center territory like it is, for example, for a Jack Hughes. I don't see James Hagens scoring 110 points in an NHL season, right? There's a certain cap to how many points we expect from Hughes, from Hagens at the NHL level, right?
Yeah, I think there is, but either way, if he's playing in a top 6, I think so much is also down to where he ends up and what situation he's playing in. Yeah. If he ends up playing on a really good contending team by the time he's 25 years old, and is on a top line with 2 elite players on his wings, maybe that's possible, right? I think he's a level of player that can also kind of grow his upside further in a situation where he's challenged to do so by elite level talent surrounding him. So definitely agree that there is clear top line upside here, but at the very least, getting a slam dunk top sixer is also a nice guarantee for NHL teams to see in that top 3, top 5 range of the draft. And that safety in projection is always something that ends up playing a bigger role in some fan bases might want it to for their teams on decision day. But to talk about the team specifically here, there are a few that stand out to us. Obviously, you have the usual suspect at the bottom of the standings. We're not including the San Jose Sharks here because we think that they already have a lot of undersized transition drivers in that lineup. I mean, you already have William Eklund, Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, so many players that are so comfortable with the puck on their stick and want those puck touches in transition that are going to be in the top 6 already. They might want to look somewhere else in their lineup to reinforce. But starting off with the Chicago Blackhawks, this is the kind of player you want to surround Connor Bedard with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether they plug him on the top line with Bedard and, I don't know, Frank Nazar down the line, because those two are starting to develop some chemistry, or if they play him on the second line as a backup to Connor Bedard and play him together on the power play, kind of like what we see in Edmonton with McDavid and Draisaitl, either way is a good decision for me. Hagens can run his own line, but he can also be a fantastic supporter to a fantastic shooter like Connor Bedard, and the two of them could just be absolute dynamite at the NHL level. But at the same time, like I said, he can run his own line. And if they place him on the second line long term with some good wingers on his side, I think that would be a fantastic top 6 option for the Blackhawks. I think Nashville's in here as well because we keep saying it. Nashville just needs upside. Like, they have a bunch of really interesting projects in their pool. They have one of the deepest pools in the class, but they don't have the level of player that James Hagens is. So I think that having a player like that to be a potential top line center for them in 2-3 years, I think is a great option for them as well. And I think the New York Islanders are a great fit, but also a funny one, given what we've heard about Yzerman and Hagens last year when they were both playing for the NTDP. The two would combine well in terms of style, but it hasn't been all the chemistry hasn't been all there at the NTDP level. However, Yzerman's starting to get more involved off the puck, and I think that could attenuate some of the issues that we saw last year in the NTDP with those two. And then finally, the Buffalo Sabres. Although I am worried about this. What do you think?
It would be going with the trend of what they've been doing in terms of looking at the draft picks they've made in the last 3 years. If you look at the first round, it's basically littered with intelligent two-way undersized centers. I mean, they did it last season with Constant Hellenius. They did it with Matthew Savoy, who's in Edmonton at this point. Noah Östlund comes to mind. A lot of these high-end draft picks being this kind of profile. James Hagens would be the best of all of those players in terms of upside and skill and projection and certainty, of course. But it would kind of be a fun culmination of this drafting trend for the Buffalo Sabres on their road to acquiring James Hagens, of drafting 3 or 4 players in similar stylistic molds along the way beforehand. And I mean, with Buffalo, I think things just are not working as it currently is going. I'm curious to see what they do on draft day. I think there's a lot of possibilities. They might go with a guy like Hagens. They might go with a guy like Martone. They might go with Schaefer if they get first overall. They could do any number of things. I would love to see Schaefer in Buffalo purely for the pure chaos of it. Yeah. Having Dahlin and Power and Schaefer, 3 first overall defensemen in one lineup.
Byron?
And Byram, 3 first overall defensemen, that would be insane in one lineup. I think that'd be funny, but probably not the best thing for his development to be in that kind of logjam immediately. But hey, yeah,
it's listen. The Sabres need something. I think the only thing I'm really worried about is just kind of how Hagens develops in that system, what type of mindset he develops playing for that organization. I think he needs a bit of a more competitive environment where things get rough and you get yelled at and you get put in your place, but your teammates care. I think is what really would benefit Hagens the most in terms of.
And who's only 1 point further up the standings than the New York Islanders? The Pittsburgh Penguins.
Oh, okay. That is scary. Following up Crosby, Malkin with Hagens and whoever else they pick next year. Fantastic. Give me that. But that's our episode done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For a second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey. We have Chip and for your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey. We've got Flip and Steele giving you the best advice you can find out there regarding your fantasy hockey team. So make sure to give them a shout. And make sure to tune in with us as we finalize our last week of January here at Locked On, and my last week at Locked On NHL Prospect. This has been Hadi Kalakesh with Sebastian High. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you tune in next time.